Good morning, everybody. And welcome to another of our ASSC Autumn Talks. For those of you who are expecting to see Fiona, our Chief Executive, she's on another important engagement this morning, and so I'm standing in to introduce this morning's session. So I'm Robert Kennedy from Supercontrol, and I'm the Chairman of the ASSC. I'm delighted to welcome our partners VisitScotland today, who are going to be focusing on how we extend our season with UK and Irish visitors, something that's absolutely topical both now and probably for the foreseeable future, as we have a big focus on domestic visitors. So I'm delighted here to have Fiona Holmes, who's the marketing manager for the UK and Ireland at VisitScotland, who's going to give an update on holiday intentions in the market, and our colleague Rona Wallace, who is global intermediary with the Global Intermediary Marketing Team within the Industry Destination and Development Team at VisitScotland. Both of them have got a lot of information that they're going to share today, and there'll be time to answer some of your questions at the end. So please put any questions you have in the little question box in the webinar software, and hopefully we will get to them all at the end, or as many as we possibly can. So I'm going to first of all hand over to Rona, who's going to set the scene for today's webinar. Thank you very much, both of you, and thank you for VisitScotland's support in this series. It's much appreciated.
Thanks, Robert, and thank you today for joining Fiona and myself. I'll be handling some of the questions and answers later on in the at the end of the session. As Robert said, if you just use the panel to the right, add in your questions, and we'll cover as many as we can at the end of the session, and we will be sharing the recording with you afterwards as well. In today's world, as Robert said, the UK market is one of the most important and never has been more important than it is now, with the restrictions on the international travel. And today's consumers are behaving differently. Our UK consumer tracker has identified 4 different segments, and those fall into life goes on, policy supporters, COVID cautious and COVID concerned. Those with the policy supporters are trusting in the local government in terms of the guidelines and are cautious. But the life goes on segment are those that are actually wanting to go, and they're the main drivers that have been driving the bounce back from lockdown. And primarily they are the families, which offers Scotland an opportunity with the rule of 6, as we have we discount the under 12s within that rule of 6. So there are opportunities there, and hopefully as Fiona goes through the next presentation, we'll hear more in terms of what you can do, who you can target, and make sure that reassurance message comes through, because that's important to all those 4 segments. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Fiona now, and she's going to take you through the UK market, overnight visitors, and those latest insights that we've got for the Scots market, the GB visitor, the Irish, and those future intentions, and what the team are planning to do in terms of the recovery with the domestic activity, and what you can do as business to ensure that you actually try and get as much business as possible into the autumn and winter as we progress from September onwards. Okay, thank you, Fiona.
Thanks, Rona. The domestic market has always been key for Scottish tourism, and due to the current circumstances has become even more crucial. This session is to share some insights into what we know about the domestic visitor, some updates from recent research around this market's future travel intentions, and then I'll finish off by sharing an update on what we've been doing at VisitScotland and some suggestions of what you can be doing to reach this key market. I just wanted to highlight the importance of the GB market to Scotland in a normal year. I'll refer to GB rather than UK here, as we're using insights from the Great Britain Tourism Survey, which includes Scotland, England and Wales data. We will come on to some insights on the Irish visitors later. In 2019, 80% of all overnight trips and 56% of all overnight spend in Scotland was by residents of Great Britain. This equates to 13.8 million trips and £3.2 billion in spend. Scots make up a significant proportion of those visits. In 2019, 55.7% of all domestic overnight trips and 43.7% of all domestic overnight spend was by residents of Scotland. This equates to 7.7 million overnight trips and £1.4 billion in spend by Scots overnight visitors. So what do we know about the Scots overnight visitor? These stats are taken from the Great Britain Tourism Survey for 2019, so it's looking at the profile pre-COVID, but interesting to consider elements that may be strengthened given the current circumstances. We know that the top motivators for Scots to take an overnight break in Scotland are for the scenery and landscape, the closeness to home, and to get away from it all. We know that they are most likely to take a short break of between 1 and 3 nights, although almost a quarter do take slightly longer breaks. And we know seasonal variations in the volume of domestic tourism are much less dramatic than in international tourism. For the current circumstances, it's encouraging to know that Scots already take overnight visits in Scotland year-round. In terms of regions, Scots visitors are also likely to travel more widely across Scotland due to that proximity and closeness to home. And we also know that car is the most popular mode of transport. Moving on to the wider GB market, what do we know about our visitors? After Scotland, England is our biggest market in terms of visitor volume and spend, in particular the regions of London and South East, North West, Yorkshire and the Humber, and the North East. In terms of motivators, for a Scotland break, the GB market are driven by scenery and landscape, if they've holidayed before and want to return, and our history and culture. They tend to take short breaks, with 62% visiting for 1 to 3 nights last year, but 30% did take longer breaks of up to a week. We know that they are interested in sightseeing, visiting historic houses, stately homes and castles, and taking short walks. Included here are the top 5 most visited regions by the GB market for overnight visits last year, and also what time of the year they visited. GB markets are likely to travel widely across Scotland's regions and visit out with the main season, as we can see with 41% of visits between October and March last year. At Visit Scotland, we have a segmentation strategy for the UK, which breaks down the market into 5 key segments. I will give you an overview of these now and ways you can reach each segment, but the full breakdown can be found at visitscotland.org. Our first segment are our natural advocates, aged between 35 to 54, and Scotland tends to be their main holiday. So it's good to remind them of the diversity of Scotland and the experiences they can have, as they're likely to return and tell their friends. They're also likely to have a good level of knowledge of Scotland, so the focus should be on enriching their existing notions. Flexible accommodation is important for natural advocates. Rural and more remote locations appeal, and self-catering in particular is well used. Engaged sightseers are our next segment, who are slightly older, 55 plus. They have the highest number of bed nights across a range of accommodation. For this segment, it's good to signpost things to do in your area and cross-promote with other local businesses. Local castles, monuments, parks, museums and galleries will be of interest. They will tend to avoid thrill-seeking type activities, but are definitely interested in getting the authentic local experience. The next segment are our adventure seekers, who tend to be younger in age, under 35, and their holidays are packed with sports, outdoor and cultural activities. To reach this audience, have an emphasis on outdoor experiences in your local area, but remember, while the adventure seekers tend to enjoy adventure, they're not limited to it. Walking and other activities that take them away from it all are also of interest. Adventure seekers will use a variety of accommodation types and quality to suit their holiday needs, which may include a mix of city, rural or coastal stays. They are more likely than other segments to go camping or to use hostels, and they are more likely to use a mix of different types and quality of accommodation in one trip than the other segments. Food-loving culturalists are our next segment. They're mid-age range between 25 to 54. They're above average holiday takers and the highest spenders. Food and drink isn't the only driving force for this segment, but definitely an interest area to promote alongside other cultural experiences in your area. Top-end accommodation appeals to this segment. They will aspire to 4 and 5 star, mainly hotels, B&Bs and self-catering. However, mid-range accommodation will also be used when needed. Our last segment are our curious travellers, who are 25 to 54, again above average holiday takers who like variety and pack a lot into a trip. These travellers are looking to try new things, so highlighting unique local experiences will pique their interest. Curious travellers will use a variety of accommodation types and quality to suit their holiday needs, which may include a mix of rural, city and coastal stays, and hotels, B&Bs and self-catering are their most popular choices. Now that you've heard a bit of a refresh on the domestic visitor and our UK segmentation strategy, I wanted to share with you some key findings from a recent research report. Research agency 56 Degree Insight have been conducting monthly research monitoring Scots holiday intention during the pandemic. The full reports can be accessed at 56degreeinsight.com. In the latest results from August, the 4th month of reporting, they were able to examine the nature of the holidays taken by Scots in Scotland in July and August, as well as allowing for some more robust predictions about future travel intentions. By late August, 53% of Scots were either considering or had taken a 2020 Scottish holiday. Interestingly, take-up was highest among families and pre-nesters, those 16 to 34 with no children in household. Whereas empty nesters, the older market with no children in household, and traditionally the mainstay of domestic tourism, were least likely to be considering a Scottish staycation this year, a reflection of the greater fears this group have around COVID. This highlights the bigger mix of Scottish visitors in 2020 and the need for businesses to adapt to different needs among a younger and more family-orientated audience. It's also worth noting that Scots do still feel a sense of nervousness around travel generally. While 3/4 are willing to consider Scotland for holidays, 1/4 will not travel at all. Positively, however, the staycation patterns of 2020 show clear potential to carry over into 2021 and beyond. Scotland remains the most likely destination for most Scots holidays next year, with 4 in 5 Scots likely to take a holiday at home. 41% of Scots are choosing to stay in self-catering accommodation, representing the importance of staying in accommodation offering a degree of safety and independence. In terms of changes in behaviour, unsurprisingly, hygiene and cleanliness top the list among potential visitors as the most important factors. There's also been a clear shift towards outdoor spaces as opposed to indoor activities, with over 3/4 of Scots seeing a key feature of a 2020 staycation as visiting the natural outdoors. Rest and relaxation is also a vital component for just under 3/4, and active outdoor pursuits will be undertaken on 2 in 5 trips. 35% of Scots saying they have been financially impacted significantly will make cost of a holiday important. And there is a clear preference to travel in private car for ease of physical distancing and the flexibility that it offers. Similar to the Scottish tracker, the National Tourist Boards of Great Britain also commissioned a weekly tracking survey to understand UK residents' intent to take short breaks and holidays and monitoring changed intentions throughout the pandemic. The full report is accessible on VisitScotland.org. The latest report from mid-August indicated that 16% of UK residents had taken an overnight short break or holiday in the UK, and looks ahead to UK residents' autumn-winter travel intentions. Confidence in the ability to take UK short breaks or holidays is decreasing slightly, potentially due to fears of a second wave of COVID-19 as local lockdowns increase. However, despite caution towards taking a domestic trip, around 1 in 5 UK residents plan on taking an overnight short break or holiday this autumn, and 1 in 4 this winter. Positively, Scotland is the #2 destination that UK residents are planning to visit in both autumn and winter months, behind South West England in autumn and London in winter. And Scotland is by far the #1 destination for Scotland residents in both autumn and winter. In terms of type of trip, those intending to visit are most likely to visit a countryside or village, followed by a city or large town and mountains or hills. And across both autumn and winter, the length of stay is more likely to be short breaks than holidays of 4+ nights. For booking, notably a large proportion of Scotland autumn and winter intenders have not yet booked their trip, which is higher amongst non-Scotland residents. Autumn intenders are most likely to book their accommodation in Scotland directly with the provider, which reflects the older demographic intending to visit in autumn favouring this channel. Online travel agents are also a popular booking channel and the leading choice for winter intenders. When looking at accommodation, preference of Scotland intenders, hotel, motel, inn is the #1 choice for accommodation amongst both autumn and winter, followed by commercial self-catering and a private home. Commercial self-catering tends to index higher in Scotland's rural destinations. I've shared some insight into what we know about the domestic visitor and their travel intentions. Here are some practical tips for what you can do to reach this key market. Adapt your messaging for the domestic audience. For Scots, this is their home, so they won't necessarily see themselves as a visitor. Your messaging and the language you use in your own channels like your website, Facebook and Twitter can reflect this. For example, inviting people to explore their local area or finding out what's on their doorstep. Take this opportunity to reconnect Scots with Scotland. For the wider UK market, a barrier can be the perception of Scotland being too far away or hard to get to, so presenting the ease of getting here within your messaging can help encourage visits. The UK market are also motivated by value for money. There's great quality experiences across Scotland, so use that quality offering and any unique selling points of your business to promote visits. The perception of added value works just as well, whether that be a bottle of wine with a stay or no cancellation fees. You should also consider collaborating and supporting other local businesses to highlight the wider regional offering. A trip will become a more appealing proposition if there's a few things on offer, so it's good to cross-promote other businesses in your area. Your online presence is also key. There has been a significant move to an online economy with increased use of online channels. This will impact future consumer journeys, so it's important for you to review and optimise your digital footprint now. Keep your website and other listings like VisitScotland and Google Card up to date with the latest opening hours and any changes that you have implemented. With more people online, it's also an opportunity to inspire future visits, and I'll come on to how you can get involved with our activities soon. Before moving on to our Visit Scotland recovery activity, I just wanted to touch on the Irish audience. We haven't specifically targeted the Irish market over the last few years due to the small volume of spend and visits versus our other overseas and domestic target regions. However, the current circumstances present a unique opportunity to reconnect with past and new visitors from Ireland. The increase in desirability of car travel and the connections with ferry travel to Ireland are key, as well as the increased desire to reconnect with friends and family. The VFR, Visiting Friends and Relatives market, accounts for a significant proportion of Irish visits compared to other markets. So what do we know about the Irish audience? Our segmentation for Ireland is slightly older, from 2009. It breaks the Irish audience into 3 key segments. Busy city dwellers. These are the successful professionals living in cities, both with and without children. They're 25 to 45 and affluent. They're familiar with Scotland and like active, fast-paced holidays and have a tendency towards city breaks with an interest in events, but also like active outdoor experiences and use a mixture of service and self-service accommodation. Cautious Comfort are our family market in Ireland, 26 to 45 age range and mid-affluence. They're much less familiar with Scotland and looking for tried and tested activities suitable for the whole family. They're more likely to take independent holidays like caravanning, camping and self-catering. And the last segment is the well-travelled empty nesters. These are the 55 plus audience with no kids at home. They're well-travelled and like to go off the beaten track. They travel abroad frequently, but Scotland is a convenient and enjoyable short break spot. They like luxury products and services and love to indulge in travel experiences. They enjoy historical cultural sites, food and drink, and the activities like golf and short walks. I will now give an update on what we at Visit Scotland have been doing in terms of marketing recovery activity. Aligned to the Scottish Government's phases of easing lockdown, our paid marketing recovery activity began very gradually in June, using paid social activity where we could be highly targeted and turn activity on and off very quickly. We divided Scotland into geographic groups and promoted very local day trips to Scots, highlighting places and attractions ready to welcome visitors and encouraging visitors to check information before they travel. As we moved into phase 3, we launched a high-profile marketing campaign on the 15th of July, encouraging Scots to travel local to make a big difference. Spanning the summer into autumn, this activity included a mix of TV, radio, digital and social, as well as activity on OTAs like Expedia and TripAdvisor to inspire visitors to holiday at home. Our creative proposition is only in Scotland can travelling so little make such a big difference, and we had both city and rural edits. Throughout the activities, we monitored and continue to monitor the circumstances very closely and have flexibility built into our media buys to allow us to make any amendments as required. As we move into autumn-winter, we will launch digital activity to the rest of UK, including activity with Hearst Publishing, reaching audiences in key titles such as Good Housekeeping, Women's Health, Cosmopolitan and Red. Looking closer at our autumn-winter plans, we will continue to use the creative proposition of Only in Scotland to showcase the unique experiences you can have in Scotland, or indeed experiences that are made unique because they are experienced here. We'll also use creative encouraging people to check in, chill out and check out all the exciting things on offer in Scotland. Similar to our first phase of recovery activity, we'll have city and rural splits, and content will tie into the emotional drivers of escapism, connection, appreciation and rest and relaxation. I know you previously created a themed calendar aligned to ours, so I also wanted to share our new content themes for each month. For rural, this includes autumn walks, coasts and islands, dark skies in Corsica, luxury, winter adventure and romance. We would encourage you to get involved with our activities. The simplest way to do this is to share our assets, which are available for you to use, whether it's one of our videos or blog posts, or making use of our digital media library, which gives access to a wealth of imagery and video content from across Scotland. The more positive and inspiring stories we can collectively share, the more we will raise the profile of Scotland as a must-visit destination. Our content team are always busy working on new assets. The most recent include our suite of Only in Scotland hero films that we used in our recovery activity, carrying the sentiment that only in Scotland can travelling so little make such a big difference. There's also regional versions and they can all be shared from our YouTube channel. Some other recent content includes a family-friendly video called Little Adventures, which tells the story of an adventure in Scotland through the imagination of 2 children. We've also got a new guide to stargazing in Scotland featuring Steve Owens from Glasgow Science Centre, and Sketching Scotland, which is a series of video tutorials on how to draw iconic Scottish buildings. Another way to get involved is by setting up a Visit Scotland business listing or ensuring your existing one is kept up to date. With the ever-changing circumstances, it's never been more important to monitor and update this and other listings like your Google card. Similarly, if you haven't already done so, applying for the We're Good to Go logo is one way to reassure potential visitors. As we saw from the intention trackers, there is still nervousness around taking trips, so anything you can do to communicate measures you have implemented will help ease concerns. To recap, if you haven't already, apply for the We're Good to Go logo to reassure potential visitors. Keep your online listings up to date with practical information around availability, any seasonal variations, and also what else is open around about. And lastly, get involved with our Visit Scotland activities by sharing our assets to inspire visits to your region. Follow our consumer social channels and also keep up to date with latest info on VisitScotland.org.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm going to, that was great. What I'll do is I'll bring back Robert and Fiona back onto the screen, and we will just then have a look at some of the questions that have been coming through. A couple of the questions so far. Helen Gray has asked Fiona, and it might be Robert that actually answers this, you mentioned commercial self-catering. I'm assuming that is the non-Airbnb and actual majority of self-catering that are actually running as a business. Robert, could you maybe answer that for Helen?
I wish I could. I was there may be a strict definition. I think that what you're saying is absolutely right. I would hope the profile of the people watching this webinar that are running self-catering for a living, but maybe there is a strict definition of that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. It's the definitions from the GBTS survey for commercial self-catering. So they do break it down in a number of ways, but here it's referring to all.
And Fiona, what hashtags are you planning to use for autumn breaks and winter? Have they been set up yet, or are we planning to then share that out to industry so they can share?
Yes, we're still using hashtag Visit Scotland and hashtag Only in Scotland. Any additional ones will be added to our Instagram feed at the top of our Instagram. You'll see the latest hashtags, but we're still using hashtag Visit Scotland and hashtag Only in Scotland.
So advice is just keep an eye on the Visit Scotland Instagram and then jump on the bandwagon of anything else that we start sharing. But also keeping an eye on VisitScotland.org, because this is getting updated on a regular basis, as well as what we're doing in market will also be under there. So just search under COVID and then there'll be a cascade of different information from there. So it's worthwhile keeping an eye on that. Another good point actually from Adele Murphy, any Irish visitor will have to currently self-isolate coming over. In our international markets, we are doing Dream Now, Travel Later. So if you are after any of the international markets, as Fiona said, any of your messaging, keeping that inspiration going, because you're trying to secure 2021 bookings and being as flexible as possible with cancellation policies, which allows people to then defer any bookings to make sure that you're kind of stacking them up in the future there. I'll just check, see if other questions. Yes, we'll be sharing the recording and we will share that to everyone as well. And there's going to be links at the bottom of the webinar, so you'll be able to click onto them with the various places that you can find more information. Another question would be, the latest rule of 6, which is causing disruption in bookings, which we know. However, it does offer self-catering in Scotland an opportunity for the under 12s not being counted in that. Robert, could you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. The fact there's actually several points on this, which what we've learned through the first period of lockdown and subsequent release or relaxation of the regulations back in June, we saw a lot of pent-up demand and a huge spike in bookings the moment that was released. And actually, to be honest, that spike in bookings has continued all the way through until the rule of 6 started to come in. So what we can be confident in, even though bookings have dropped down a bit, it's still nothing like the collapse that we had back at the beginning of lockdown, but bookings have dropped down a bit. But what we can be confident is that when the rules or the regulations are changed and we're allowed to accept larger parties in our larger properties again, then there will be a massive spike in bookings. There's a lot of pent-up demand there. What we're advising clients to do is to really focus on this period of the next 3 months and take bookings which absolutely comply with the current regulations, the rules of 6. But don't be too concerned about 2021 yet, because if we do see, and it is an if, of course, if we do see a relaxation in those regulations, then we will get high demand when that comes. You're quite right. Here in Scotland, at the moment of speaking, we have a slightly more advantageous rule with regards to children than they do in England. And there are bookings coming in that reflect that situation. We're looking at school holidays in October, and so there is a great opportunity around that. Booking levels are still high. They are at least equivalent to previous years and a touch over. Yes, there's been a lot of cancellations over the last couple of weeks, but booking levels are still high. And so for those of you who are able to host groups that comply with the rule of 6, the opportunities are absolutely still there for you over this next period, however long that takes us. So while I'm sure a lot of you on this call have experienced quite a lot of cancellations over the last week, bookings are coming in, and so please just don't be disenchanted. We're looking at a positive future for self-catering for all of the reasons that we've looked at today. There are opportunities in this, and 2021, I think everyone is looking forward to a very positive year on domestic tourism, as we've seen in the presentation. So the future is looking good, even though, like every business sector, we're going to have a bit of a bumpy time over the next few months.
Thanks, Robert. Another, in terms of the reassurance message, I just wanted to kind of hammer that home, because across all that we've been doing is the importance, and that's what we're hearing from the sentiment, the UK tracker, is that they all need that reassurance. And as the changes keep on happening in terms of restrictions, they do want to make sure that everyone is doing what they need to do. And in terms of the reassurance message, Robert, do you want to expand on other things that self-caterers could do to make sure that on all their platforms are getting that message across?
Yeah, so it was interesting in the presentation, right at the top of the list was cleanliness. It's always been important, but of course we all know it is super important now. Those of us who are in the self-catering sector know, as I am, know that it has been, well, it's taking us twice the amount of time to properly sanitize and disinfect our properties in between changeovers, but the guests absolutely appreciate that, and so maintaining those standards is absolutely critical. That this situation isn't going to go away for a long time, and so we are going to have to continue that. So it's really important, but don't just do the cleaning. Make sure you're informing your guests about that. So make sure it's on your website, it's on your distribution channels. There is a very good training course if those of you haven't managed to attend that, and that gets you a great certificate which you can evidence on your platforms and on your website to prove that you are taking this seriously. So looking after your guests in all the other social distancing things, but make sure you're talking about what you're doing here, because it's really important. The other thing that is probably the most important influencer at the moment is offering flexible terms. As we've seen in the last couple of weeks or the last week, these things can change very quickly, and we may even have further changes this week. Guests aren't able to plan ahead in the way they were, and they're nervous about doing that. So you need to be able to offer flexible cancellation terms, as flexible as you possibly can be. All of the main OTAs are now prioritizing, or they have very obvious filters that prioritize flexible cancellation terms, and the guests are obviously looking for that. It was actually a pattern that had started before. It was people were already looking for more flexible booking terms, and obviously COVID has just exaggerated that. At SuperControl, many of our clients have used a insurance program called Master Cancel, which helps protect your income and lets you refund from the guests. But however you choose to do it, offering flexibility is critical if you want to take bookings over the next period. The bookings are there to get, and you're going to have some disruption, but absolutely they're out there. There's business to be had right now. There's bookings coming in, and they could be coming into your properties if you're offering the right attractive terms and just showing what you're doing to help protect your guests.
Okay, just another couple of questions coming in. What is Google Card? That's just your Google My Listing, My Business Listing. If you're unsure of that, then drop us an email, and if you don't know who your industry relations manager is, then they can help you with that, or one of our colleagues can get in touch with you and just explain that further. There's another question come in terms of what do you mean by flexible terms?
Yeah, so maybe just to clarify, what I mean by flexible terms, I hope is relatively straightforward. If someone books and they have to cancel, then they get their money back. Now, they might not get all of their money back, but they'll get a significant proportion, if not all of their money back. Each of the main OTAs, Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia, etc., have preset sets of terms which you can adopt when you're listing your properties, and they range from strict terms where when the guest books, most, if not all, of their money is non-refundable, and clearly those are not very attractive at the moment, even for very last moment bookings. And they vary down to flexible terms, where even cancelling right up to the last minute, they will get their money back. Now, it's up to you where you choose the level, but the more flexible you can be, the safer the guest is. They're not going to spend money on something that they can't use. Then you are going to attract more bookings. It's also important to, and probably some of you on the call have experienced chargebacks from guests who had to cancel over the last few months and weren't able to stay, and maybe part of in the old way of doing things, part of their funds were, maybe their deposit was non-refundable. What we're seeing increasingly is guests are just going to their card providers and issuing chargebacks. So if you aren't offering flexible terms, they're going through the back door to get that money back, and recent rulings by the CMA have really strengthened that argument. As I said earlier, at SuperControl, you can use a program called Master Cancel, which it protects you. So if the booking cancels within a window, then you can make a claim and get your revenue back and refund the guest. But however you choose to do that offer that flexibility, it's really important, and I can't see that changing for some time to come while this virus is still circulating.
Yes, in terms of our insights that we've seen to the consumer, they're certainly looking for that flexible booking, and also booking very last minute, because they want to make sure that they're able to travel as close as possible. So being as flexible as possible. And I guess the rule of thumb is, if you were booking something and you had to cancel, how would you want to be treated in today's world? And that rule of thumb always kind of hits home as to how you need to approach it. But every business has to take those own decisions. Another question's come in terms of Visit Scotland quality assurance evaluation. Our teams are able to do a phone call, and what I'll do is we'll follow up with Helen, who came in and asked that question. So we'll pick up with you through ASSC as to who you are, and we'll get a phone call set up with you so you can follow that up with our QA team. I think that is the final questions coming up. I'll just see if there's anything else. Fiona, in terms of best practice to promote your reassurance message, do you want to just reinforce that in terms of what they can do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just across all of your channels, your website, any emails you're sending out, your social channels, the more that you can reiterate what you're doing. So there's lots of great things happening across all the businesses. So it's just making sure that you then pass that on to the consumer and let them know. Because as we saw in the travel intentions, there's still a quarter of Scots that would say that they wouldn't travel in 2020. So it's trying to encourage them that there is the reassurance there and the measures are being put in place. Another thing that the report was showing is that people haven't yet booked their trip. So the more that we're all talking about it, and as Rona says, the last minute bookings are what we're seeing as the new normal compared to people booking 3 and 4 months in advance for the domestic market. We're now seeing people booking that week to travel. So for autumn winter breaks, it really is just making sure that all your modes of communication through your website and social channels and everything is conveying what measures you're putting into place.
Thanks, Fiona. And then an additional one is any testimonials that you have in this COVID time, reaffirming basically from the other consumers in terms of that cleanliness, the measurements that you went to as a business, and rather than you saying it, it's actually coming from recent consumers or visitors that you've had guests staying in your accommodation. So testimonials are very strong. So that's another way to just reaffirm, especially when TripAdvisor, for example, whatever was said before, it's still important, but people are looking for the latest information to reassure themselves that they're okay to travel. And I think that's about our time up. I'm going to hand back over to Robert now, just to do the final wrap up. In fact, actually, I'll just do the last links slide myself. Sorry, Andrew's we're in the background. When we see the actual, when you see the recording, when we pass that out, there's a final slide that basically gives you all the links in terms of insights, handy places where to go to, and actually it's just coming up now. So it's basically a dedicated links that will help you to find out more about the segments, the latest UK sentiment trackers, and the variety of links in terms of business advice and support. And depending on what happens today and other announcements that come around, that is permanently updated from our corporate comms team. So keeping in touch is onto.org, onto our COVID page is a good way to access that information, as well as all the information that the ASSC offer too. It also gives us access to the digital media library and how to keep in touch in terms of our social media and across our business advice and PR. I'll pass over to Robert to do the final slide because time is ticking on, and he'll tell you the future talks that are coming up from the autumn talks with yourselves. Thanks very much.
So thank you so much, both of you. That was a very insightful session. It's so good to see that there's still so much opportunity out there, and there's some really good material in there, very practical ways to reach those markets. So it was really, really interesting. Thank you very much. We are continuing our series of ASSC Autumn Talks with the next 3 scheduled and on the screen now. You can go to the ASSC.co.uk website to see more details. The next one is incredibly important. The reason Fiona's not here today is she's on all of our behalves in a very important meeting relating to this short-term lets regulation that looks like it's going to come round this year or the start of next year. Potentially a lot of, well, it could affect everyone in this call. So that's something that a call in the end of this month that I would really advise you join. And we're fortunate enough to have Fergus Ewing presenting on that call. So it's a really, really a call that everyone should be on, a webinar that everyone should attend. And then we've got another session with Visit Scotland, focusing specifically on digital. Really grateful for the input from Visit Scotland both today and throughout this COVID period. But this is going to be really interesting because it's clearly going to be more and more important. It always has been more important. And then finally, our great partners at the Cumberland and EQ Accountants looking at business finance, something which again is going to be of great interest to everyone on this call and everyone in the sector. Just a quick thank you to our sponsors. ASSC couldn't exist without its members and its sponsors. They're all listed on the screen here, but in particular our friends at Tunnocks, who have sponsored the Autumn Talks series. A familiar Scottish product that you should all be offering to your guests. No one is going to turn down caramel wafers or something similar from Tunnocks. So thank you again, Fiona and Rona. It's been a really interesting session, and thank you everybody for joining today. We look forward to seeing you again soon in a couple of weeks at the next ASSC Autumn Talks webinar.